Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajacharya Sto Tarashata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. How did you get it to work? You got it with another computer, you said?
No, this is not database.
Oh, it's not database.
This is one they use in LA.
Uh-huh.
All public stuff.
It's a different font. Yeah, I see. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, of all-pervading personality of Godhead, now from our respectful obeisances unto you. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by Srila Prabhupada, Canto 4, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Chapter 25. The characteristics of King Puranjan. Today's text 56. Okay. Evam karmasu sangsaktak.
Evam karmasu sangsaktak.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Tattad evan vavartata.
Tattad evan vavartata.
Evam karmasu sangsakta.
Evam karmasu sangsakta.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Tattadevan vavartata.
Tattadevan vavartata.
Evam karmasu sangsakta.
Evam karmasu sangsakta.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Mahishi yadyadi heta.
Tattadevan vavartata.
Tattadevan vavartata.
Okay.
Evam karmasu samsakta. Evam karmasu samsakta. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Kamatma vanchito buddha. Mahisi yadyadi heta. Mahisi yadyadi heta. Tattad evam vavartata. Tattad evam
Vavartata.
Evam karmasu samsakta.
Evam karmasu samsakta.
Namatma vanchito pura.
Ramatma
Vanchito buddha.
Mahisi yajya vedeta.
Mahisi Yadyadiheta.
Tata deva pavartata.
Tata Devan Vavartata. Evam karmasu samsakta. Ramatma vanchito buddha. Mahisi Yadyadiheta. Tata Devan Vavartata.
Evam kamasu samsakta
Evam karmasu samsakta.
kamatma vanchito buddha
Kamatma vanchito buddha.
mahishi yayarita
Mahishi yadyadiheta.
tattarivam vavartata.
Tattarivam vavartata. Word for word, evam, thus, karmasu, in fruitive activities, sangsaktaha, being too much attached, kama atma, lusty, vanchataha, cheated, abudhaha, less intelligent, Mahishi, the queen, yat, whatsoever, iheta, she would desire, tat, all of that, eva, certainly, anvavartata, he followed. Translation: being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Puranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill the desires of his wife. Indeed, he used to fulfill the desires of his wife, the queen. Please repeat: being thus entangled in different types of mental concoctions and engaged in fruitive activities, King Puranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. Srila Prabhupada's purport. When a living entity is in such bewilderment that he is under the control of his wife or material intelligence, he has to satisfy the intelligence of his so-called wife and act exactly according to her dictates. Various shastras advise that for material convenience, one should keep his wife always satisfied by giving her ornaments and by following her instructions. In this way, there will be no trouble in family life. Therefore, for one's own social benefit, one is advised to keep his wife satisfied. In this way, when one becomes the servant of his wife, he must act according to the desires of his wife. Thus, one becomes more and more entangled. In Bengal, it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, he loses all reputation. However, the difficulty is that unless one becomes a most obedient servant of his wife, family life becomes disturbed. In the Western countries, this disturbance gives rise to the divorce law. And in Eastern countries like India, there is separation. Now this disturbance is confirmed by the new introduction of the divorce law in India. Within the heart, the mind is acting, thinking, feeling, and willing. And falling under the control of one's wife is the same as falling under the control of material intelligence. Thus, one begets children by his wife and becomes entangled in so many activities under the control of mental concoctions. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnana. I didn't hear a resounding ki jai in response. I wonder if people are disturbed by that purple. It's definitely not PC for today. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my eyes. With the torch of knowledge, I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So being thus entangled. So once again, today's verse follows from yesterday's verse, which said, Gangamantri's verse was, sometimes he, that's Puranjan, used to go to his private home with one of his chief servants, the mind, who was named Vishuchina. At that time, illusion, satisfaction, and happiness used to be produced from his wife and children. And again today, being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities. What are fruitive activities? Do you know?
Fruitive activities.
Fruitive.
Things that you get a result from.
Yeah, especially when they're designed for your selfish satisfaction.
Suffering or pleasure.
Well, that's the result of it. Fruitive is specifically selfish activities. King Puranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. So all of that indicates the conditioned soul's complete identification with and desire to enjoy Krishna's material energy. So as soon as we want to, Krishna Buliya Jeev Bhagavan Chokori. As soon as we want to just enjoy ourselves, independent of Krishna, and we want to exploit his material energy, then we have to come under the control of karma, like we said. And things don't work out. We don't really enjoy it. Sometimes Prabhupada would define material desires as those desires which can never be fulfilled. Think about that. It's a losing proposition. You can't really, but I'll revisit that later because it's hard for us to accept. So today's verse describes the results of our mistaken identity and foolish desires. We cheat ourselves. Srila Prabhupada, his verse translation says, our mental, quote, mental concoction produces our, quote, fruitive activities. In other words, it's just it's like a dream, our mental concoction. That's it. It's a desire that can never be fulfilled. So it produces our fruitive activities, which ultimately never work out. So to help us recover from our foolishness, in Bhagavad Gita 2:54, Arjuna asks Krishna for the symptoms of the Sanskrit is Stita Pragya, which means somebody who is fixed in transcendence, beyond the entanglement of fruitive activity. Let's look at that verse, because both in that, in the follow-up with Krishna's answer to the question, we get the same idea of mental concoction. So here's what Krishna asked in 254, which is the whole Gita in summary. The whole chapter is contents of the Gita summarized. Anybody know? 254. Arjuna uvacha stita pragyasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadi. See the stitadi. Fixed. Somebody who's fixed in intelligence. Stitadi king prabhasheta kim ma seta brajeta kim. So kim, it's a question, what? Arjuna said, oh Krishna, what are the symptoms? Because Krishna has just spent a lot of previous verses describing somebody who's transcendental. So he says, but he wants to know specifically, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? Because Arjuna's whole problem was that he was, by Krishna's arrangement, was thinking fruitively, calculating based on his own happiness and distress that he didn't want to fight. So now Krishna's giving him the solution. So Arjuna's getting intrigued. This sounds like maybe a way out of my dilemma. What are the symptoms of what his consciousness is merged in transcendence? And then he says, he gets very specific. How does he speak? Kabasha. What is his language? How does he say Kima Sita? Asan. Kima Sita Brajeta Kim. And how does he walk? How does he go? Brajeta. How does he go? How does he walk? So, although Arjuna's queries seem to ask only about a transcendentalist's external behavior, it seems like he's asking for something rather superficial. Although it's true, a through and through transcendentalist, you can know him by his speech, and it's the way he behaves, and even how, like Gangamatra was pointing out, like our Prabhupada, how he sat, how he walked. On the memories recordings, the devotees are always saying, I was shocked when I first saw him because I thought maybe I heard him, and he must be 10 feet tall or something. He talks like a king. It's so big. But he was only like 5 feet 2 or 3, or he was so short. But then he would walk with his head held high, like a king. Because he was Krishna's representative. He was, not that he was proud for himself, but he was Krishna's ambassador. So Arjuna appears to be asking about something that's maybe not so deep, but in his Gita commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reveals how each question's internal meaning. Yeah. So let's look at that. I'm going to Purijan Prabhu's Gita Study Guide, which he looked, of course, at Prabhupada's purports, but then he also looked at Baladev and Vishwanath's commentaries. So Burijan remarks, he says, Arjuna wants to know how to recognize the stita pragya, one in divine consciousness. He therefore asks, what are his symptoms? How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? And then he says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Arjuna's first question asks, how is one who is transcendentally situated, stita pragya, described? What are his characteristics? Krishna answers this first question in text 55. So between in the answer that Krishna gives, he doesn't just give one answer, not just in text 55, 55, 56, 57, 58. Yeah, that's basically, well, especially 5, 6, and 7. Vishwanath points out that Krishna is answering Arjuna's questions in a very internal way. So although these questions seem to deal only with such a person's external behavior, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reveals each question's internal meaning. So, so in 55, Krishna says, Stita Pragyasya, and he says, what is it? Sri Bhagavana Vacha, Prajahati Yada Kaman, Sarvan Partha Manogatan. There is the mental concoction, Manogata. Atmanyevatmana Tushtak Stita Pragyasta Dochate. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Oh, Partha, when a man, here's the internal thing, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification. Arjuna said, what is, how does he sit, how does he walk? But then Krishna immediately goes internal, which arise from mental concoction. We have senses, as we've been hearing, and then there's sense objects, and then we imagine we're going to enjoy. And even if we enjoy for a while, it always gets stale because everything here is is under the time factor. And so even if you have a nice piece of cheesecake from Govinda's, how much can you enjoy that? If you can't keep eating it. No, yeah. That's the first piece. Okay, I'll have another. Third, I don't know about the third. Fourth, no, you're killing me. Everything is we're so limited. Okay, so, and when his mind thus purified, because he's given up desires for mental concoction, finds satisfaction in the self alone, the real self. That's not been co-opted, by material intelligence. It's not under the sway of, the material desires. Then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. And then, Borjan says, the Stita Pragya reveals his position by having no material affection. Even when we're engaged with the sense objects, the devotee is doing it. Somebody, even if, not necessarily even a completely through and through devotee, but when we're engaging with the sense objects, if we're practicing the disciplines of bhakti, we're engaging with the sense objects with transcendental intention. And so we're not implicated in karma. And we don't have the unfortunate, we're not let down. Just like we see with our eyes, and we see the form of the deity, and then when we become so Krishna conscious, we see Krishna everywhere in his energies. So it's a different engagement with the sense objects. And then when we take prasad, we relish the prasadam. It's the best food in the three worlds, but we know that we can't eat it unlimitedly because we're, for now, living in a limited body. So we take enough for our service, and then we eat to live. We don't live to eat. We do. That's an old saying. Are we eating? Are you living to eat or eating to live? So we eat to live in devotional service. So now in 56 and 57, Krishna says, continuing the answer is what are the symptoms? He says, one who is not disturbed in mind amidst the threefold miseries, because there's always something, right? As you hear our dear Gaura Shakti always says, there's always something, right? Or anybody said, we all say that. There's always something. Because that's, material energy is designed to frustrate us, so we ask why. And then, if we're really foolish, we just keep beating our head against the wall and trying to keep enjoying it. But, so one who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries. We have no expectations There's always going to be threefold miseries. Or elated when there is happiness. We don't get carried away, right? When something good comes along. Oh, Social Security just increased my COLA, my cost of living. It increased, what is it, COLA? Cost of living adjustment. Yeah. Oh, they gave me $5 more now. Thanks a lot. I don't get carried away thinking, okay, who needs God? I got my Social Security check. He lives on the and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger. Yeah. Yeah, we're not attached. Therefore, we're not afraid of losing it because we know it just comes and goes because it doesn't belong to us. It's just passing through our fingers to use in Krishna's service. And anger, we don't get frustrated because that's the nature of the beast. It's called the sage of steady mind. Yeah. And then Krishna continues, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it. We don't curse, the heavens. Why me? We're not like Job, shaking his fist to the sky in the Bible. Neither praising it nor despising it is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Yeah. Okay. And then the comment from Borjan. Astita D. Muni is both fixed in knowledge and aloof from the material world. He lives on the transcendental platform, and therefore his mind cannot be materially disturbed. Srila Prabhupada writes, so this is the last thing I'll quote from this point. This is from Prabhupada's purport. Quote, such a fully Krishna-conscious person is not at all disturbed by the onslaughts of the threefold miseries. Prabhupada uses that word a lot. Onslaught. It's always coming, right? For he accepts all miseries as the mercy of the Lord. Whoa. That's really advanced, huh? I mean, we might say it, but are we actually meaning it? Oh, Krishna's mercy. Thinking himself only worthy of more trouble due to his past misdeeds. And he sees that his miseries, by the Lord's grace, are minimized to the lowest. Similarly, when he is happy, he gives credit to the Lord, thinking himself unworthy of the happiness. So, in this way, we're always in the mood of gratitude, whether the happiness or the distress comes. If the happiness comes, oh, Krishna, you're so kind, and in distress, oh, Krishna, you're so kind. If I wasn't trying to be a devotee, it would have been, the reaction, do me, would have been much more. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then, I'll keep reading. The symptoms Krishna mentions in the verse describe a Krishna conscious person, but they may also describe one who is liberated, but not Krishna conscious. Yeah, somebody who's actually on a transcendental platform, not Bhagavan realized, but it could be an impersonalist. Could also be kind of equipoise in happiness and distress. An exalted devotee is unaffected by material happiness or distress because his consciousness has nothing to do with matter. But the one who is simply liberated in Brahman may be neutral in relation to the material world, while having no positive engagement in Krishna consciousness. Thus, these symptoms are applicable to both personalists and impersonalists, though Srila Prabhupada emphasizes how they apply to personalists, because that will last. The impersonal never lasts. Because the impersonalist only lasts as long as he's not engaged with the material world. But how long can that happen? Because ultimately we're social beings, even the spirit, not just the material body, not just the conditioned soul is a social being, but liberated souls are too. Yes, look at Radha and Krishna. Krishna's never alone, right? He's always at least with his flute, who's also a devotee. Yeah. The next question, how does he sit? So this is still on answering those questions. Means, how does he not engage his senses? So when we're sitting, we're stationary. What is his mentality when his senses are restrained from their objects? Krishna answers in the next 2 verses. Okay, I'll just read them. 58. One who was able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Yeah. So we see our turtle friends, when you get too close, they withdraw if there's some danger. So also when we are engaging, we do engage our senses with sense objects in Krishna's service, but sometimes we have to pull back too when something is too dangerous, either another person or if there's fire. We can use fire, but also fire can be very destructive, as our friends in LA know dramatically right now. Such a person uses his senses only when required. Whether or not that restraint is difficult for him is described in the next verse. So here's the famous higher taste verse. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, it's like people are getting released now from these prisons, right? In Gaza, they're coming out, the hostages. And so what was it like? Oh, it was horrible. We couldn't, see each other, and we hardly got any food. And now that's a big thing when people are incarcerated for too long. So I remember even when our Nadja came out of incarceration, he was saying how it was because when you're inside, there's so little sensory stimuli compared to outside that it was an adjustment just walking around outside. He was saying, just so much sunlight, like especially in Arizona. And just in terms of what you hear, and it's quite an adjustment to be outside. So, though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. Because, again, even the soul is sentient. It's not that we're sentient just because we have a body, but the soul is sentient. And we might still have a taste. We can restrict ourselves from trying to enjoy, but then that taste remains. But here's the higher taste. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste is fixed in consciousness. So a devotee has learned the art. This is a mature devotee now, of how to engage in a way that it's a higher taste. It's a higher experience, whether we're eating or even the act of bringing a child into the world. Yeah, I am sex life, which is not contrary to religious principles. That is a different experience than illicit sex. Yeah, it's a sacred act, and it's a higher taste. Okay, so let's move on from that, and then so I'll just finish my notes here. In Gita 255, Krishna first of all answers broadly that a transcendentalist gives up all sense desire arising from, quote, mental concoction. The same concoction entangling Paranja and all of us in material pursuits that seem worthwhile, but in the end only cheat us. Prabhupada, was that in the verse? Yeah, I think that's the way he's... Being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities. Yes, King Paranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. Now, for so long, we have invested our desires in trying to enjoy Krishna's material energy that it is hard for us to accept that we were cheating ourselves. It's just like, don't tell me that, that I've been a fool for so long. We don't like to hear that we're a fool, that we're cheating ourselves. It's hard to accept that we've been scammed by our own desires. We've been so foolish that we're cheating ourselves, we're scamming ourselves. In his purport, Srila Prabhupada points out that even, quote, various shastras, I can only think of the Kama Sutra, advise that for, quote, material convenience, one should keep his wife satisfied by giving her whatever she wants and following her instructions. What's that joke that all experienced husbands say? Happy wife, happy life. And then he might, here's another one, he might say, yes, I always have the last word. Yes, dear. Right? Because he knows that, if he's not keeping her happy, that he's going to catch it. In English, we call this a henpecked husband. One who allows himself to be dominated by his wife. Then Srila Prabhupada indicates a telling paradox. So this is from the purport, you might have caught it. On the one hand, Prabhupada says in Bengal, which was Prabhupada's experience, he grew up in, Bengal then, there was no partition, just Bengal. Calcutta, he was a Calcutta boy. That if one simply serves his wife's desires, his stature as a man is degraded. How did Prabhupada put it here? In Bengal, that's the Gita. In Bengal, it is said that if one becomes an obedient servant of his wife, he loses all reputation. And here's the paradox. However, the difficulty is that unless one becomes a most obedient servant of his wife, family life becomes disturbed. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're an obedient servant of your wife, your friends might call you henpecked. We have other rather more graphic, vulgar expressions in the West, but that's one, henpecked. We might call this a henpecked husband. So, on the other hand, if a man he doesn't simply serve his wife, the whole family is disturbed, and divorce may follow, right? And yeah, in Prabhupada's own life, he was faithfully serving his family, the wife and children, for 36 years, and then he displeased her by walking out. Of course, she didn't think he was serious. What did she say? Well, if I have to choose between the tea and my husband, I'll have to choose the tea. And so Prabhupada heard that, and that was the last straw. He walked out on his heels, turned on his heels, and walked out, and they never saw him again. Except Vrindavan Chandra, his youngest son, he saw him. Okay. In this way, the battle of the sexes obscures life's spiritual purpose. So what's the Krishna conscious resolution to all this? Damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? You try to enjoy the material energy, and it might seem to work for a while, but after a while it gets stale, or let's look at the Gita, 1839. Prabhupada gets very graphic. Happiness in the mode of passion. Oh boy, listen to this. He goes right for the jugular. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion. Oh no, that's mode of ignorance. It's 38, huh? Yeah, It's 38. That's the mode of ignorance. That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, if we simply try to enjoy the sense objects with our material senses, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. Never ends well. Purport, and Prabhupada goes right to the jugular. A young man and a young woman meet, and the senses drive the young man to see her, to touch her, and to have sexual intercourse. In the beginning, this may be very pleasing to the senses, but at the end, or after some time, it becomes just like poison. They are separated, or there is divorce. There is lamentation, there is sorrow, etc. Such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. I have personal experience. Maybe we all do. Okay. So what's the spiritual, what's the solution to all this? Well, the spiritual purpose is of man and a woman getting together is to help each other. Spiritually, go back to Godhead. That's the purpose. This is spiritual intelligence. Then the wife is no longer some kind of, Jezebel. How is she portrayed? Or it can be taken that way. Or the man for the woman can be Maya, right? But they're partners in the enterprise, the project of going back to Godhead. This is spiritual intelligence above the misidentification and material desires that infest the mental plane. The mental plane is just, we just imagine that it's all going to be hunky-dory and materially. And even when you have that spiritual intelligence, as any Krishna conscious husband and wife can attest, you got to work at it. You got to work at it because we're all in the hospital here trying to get better. And sometimes we have relapses. And, I'll tell you who's good at this is my godbrother and godsister, Partha and Uttama from Sharanagati. In British Columbia, they head up the Grihastha Vision team. And they role play when they give these Grihastha seminars. And so what is one funny skit that I see them do? It's like Uttama playing the disgruntled wife goes up to her husband and says, "You never say you love me." And then the husband says back, "What do you mean? I told you when we got married I loved you." And that was like 54. They've been married like 54 years or something. And then she goes, "Well, yeah, that was 50 years. And what about lately?" "Oh, really? You want me to say? You want me to tell you again?" It's so funny the way they do it. Yeah. So anyway. So you always got to work at it, and they do. They say, "Come on, you even if you've been married a long time, we're not pure devotees, so we're conditioned. So these old habits of ours keep come up, and we got to lovingly call each other out on it." And because there is real love, because they have been helping each other for so long, go back to Godhead. That they survive. They can be straight with each other. And now, this is funny. What Dhira will have, I'm sure he's going to do. It's a 5-verse block, and it's all about in very specific, almost it's like tragicomic detail, how Puranjan was following his queen, the material intelligence, his queen, the queen represents material intelligence around. And wait till you hear this tomorrow. It's like Wow. Yeah, tragic. It's only that's the word I can think of. Tragic comic. It's a tragedy and it's hilarious at the same time. Okay, I'm going to read the verse again. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand. Being thus entangled in different types of mental concoction and engaged in fruitive activities, King Paranjan came completely under the control of material intelligence and was thus cheated. Indeed, he used to fulfill all the desires of his wife, the queen. Questions, comments? No? Okay. I guess we're done. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki